This has been a project that I've been working on, and it's just something that has kind of come to fruition in the last 6 months or so, and is beginning to spread as a concept, as an idea, as a planning mechanism for a number of different types of purposes, actually. Targeted Touchpoint is a planning system or a processing system for websites, apps, database integration. It can be used for for group and cloud IT interaction topology. What that means basically is just mapping concepts and mapping people, that sort of thing. Campaigns, business development, and CRMs, partnership and departmental task planning, that sort of thing. It works really, really well for integration of partnerships. What are you going to need? Try to keep this real simple. I love the electronic world, believe me. I use it all the time. We have these pads and everything else, but the reality of it is a lot of times people work best from pencil and paper. And so we're going to talk in terms of how do you put together these ideas with just pencil and paper so that you can turn around and present your idea to someone else, and they can quickly look at what you're doing and go, oh, I get it. I get what your concept is. I see what your flow is. Having an idea is definitely, one thing. We can all come up with an idea of something we'd love to sell or whatever the case would be, but making this idea come to realization, making it come to a process that is actually going somewhere and beginning to generate interest and ultimately generate what? Income is another story. And so the idea here is we've got to have a way to be able to streamline those kinds of processes. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is that behind every successful idea that I've ever worked with out there, and I've worked with a lot of different ideas, just a mess of stuff that's got to be done. That's all there is to it. And a lot of times people just don't perceive that. And there's no reason for them to some degree. That's the reality of it. When you're trying to start a business, let's say a mechanic business of some sort, I don't expect that person to have the knowledge of what kind of data systems we would have to manage on the back side. How do we manage your clients? How do we keep track of them? How do we begin to market to them? How do we draw them back to us? All those kinds of things. Their idea is, I just want to work on Toyota, and that's to be expected. But unfortunately, in order to really do that and start that business, there's a ton of stuff that's got to be done. That's all there is to it. And so how do I wrap my head around that? How do I go about really getting an idea of how this is going to work? More importantly, how do we streamline that process? And so basically it came down to, for myself, as I was working with all these people, that I had to come up with an idea for myself to keep things very, very straight. And over the years, I was introduced to this concept called Touchpoint, and I'm the person who added the word targeted to it, but Touchpoint, and we're going to cover what that is here in a few minutes. So again, planning method, definition, and theory. So let's quickly move into this. What is a touch point? Okay? And years ago, I actually was introduced to this concept of touch points from the standpoint of every point in time that the customer touches or connects with your company throughout an entire product or service delivery. But what I discovered was, years ago, if I could understand their business from this perspective, there was what I would refer to as this equal and opposite thing that always went on. So in other words, when the customer would touch, if you will, my process in a particular way, from their perspective, there was always the equal and opposite thing that would happen from the company side, correct? And it could be data related. It actually could be, because we might have to keep track of that client, and then maybe even collect more information for that client, or whatever the case is, or whatever the product is that we're selling, or an educational piece, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's where the touch point concept came from, was getting out of your own mind, looking at your services, your product from your customer's perspective, understanding how you're planning on touching these clients, and then trying to build what is the equal and opposite concept behind it. That's where we're going to go. So the targeted touchpoint mapping is a schematic representation of participants or information or tasks with regard to their genuine or possible relations with one another for the purposes of planning. I'm going to touch on this very quickly here. Again, this is that equal and opposite side. So we're going to deal with timelines. We're going to look at timelines, and we're going to look at cycles. And here's my theory. Here's where I started coming up with ideas. And that was all interactions consist of 4 basic attributes. Introduction, again, what is it? Service, it's that introduction piece where we're talking about who we are. It's service, it's the program, it's the campaign. It's all about meeting people. And then we move into, okay, let's learn a little bit more about this. Let's start investigating how we have to start doing whatever it is we're doing. But this is that point of determination. I really want to do this. I really want to buy this car. Things like that. Commitment. Obviously, we get into the sales, the contract. We get into the work beginning. This is even where contingency type concepts go on. So anytime we start entering that point where someone is exchanging money, really signing the paper, we get the nails in the hand, we're ready to start hammering this puppy in. We're in that process. We can tell where we are in this whole thing, right? And we can even timeline it. We can even say dates and times if we wanted to. And again, the evaluation. And the interesting thing about evaluation, and that's why I have all these people in here, is that everybody in the process is a part of the evaluation, whether it's the salesperson, manager, or the client themselves, or whatever it is. And it has to do with how is the performance? How did things go? What was there true value? Things like that. Did I glean something that I can work with? Would I recommend you? So we're those kinds of thinking processes that are beginning to happen with people. Would I return? Would I do this again with you? Okay, so what if we could take that and turn it into a cycle? This time works like a cycle. It goes around in circles, and what does it do for us? And so this is what I call the scope, the touchpoint scope. And this is where I took that timeline and basically I turned it into a cycle. And you have introduction over here, determination, commitment, and evaluation. And it works very simply. Again, the person enters the concept in a timeline fashion. But the person enters your cycle here. They're in the introduction phase. Sometimes they'll move on, right? They didn't want to be here anymore, if you will. But those who we can actually determine who are because they enter this phase here. And then it becomes numbers games, and I realize that. There's a lot of numbers issues. There's that 10-3-1 that my wife and I talk about a lot, stuff like that. People can drop out and all sorts of things. Then they enter the commitment. Then they enter the evaluation. But what I want to point out here is that one of the other reasons that I like this is because what it automatically teaches us to do is to keep people in a cycle, to keep them engaged, to remember that this is all coming back to you, if you will, right? Everything you're doing is going to come back at you. We're going to do some scoping here, and this gets rather interesting. Everybody's bought a car, and so I thought it would be a good idea for us to just go buy a car. And we'll just keep it simple, but basically what it boils down to is we're going to do a timeline of it real quick. And so, again, working with this particular concept, a customer goes on a lot, for the most part. Where does it happen? Obviously, introduction. Salesperson connects with that person. Hi, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. In that same location. Identifies the needs of the car. Termination. So now they're communicating. See how things are beginning to happen. And again, a lot more can go on in here. I realize that we're just going to do it quickly. Determine bottom line pricing, all that kind of stuff. Where is that determination? Financing, where are we? Determination, yeah, we're not talking about a little bit more about the money. We haven't signed anything yet. Conditional closing, that's where, it's like if I do upgrading, offer upgrade, that begins to start telling me, oh, you do want to buy this car provided I can get this kind of thing in the car. So that's conditional and offer upgrade. Where is that? Closing sale. So all we're doing is we're just kind of timelining it. And I realize it's very simple. It doesn't do a whole lot for us. And recommended services, bring your car back, right? All right. But let's turn it into this process. And this is just looking at the customer. We're going to be adding some other things to this in a minute. You'll see why I go through this slow process of building. So again, customer on the lot, where does it happen? Salesperson connect. Identify the need. Determine bottom line price. Finance. Conditional close sale. Offer upgrade. Close the sale. Customer survey. Recommended services. So again, if I were trying to keep track of something in here from a database standpoint, one of the things I'd have to know is, who's the customer, where are they at, what are the finances, conditional closes, all that kind of stuff. But we're not going to stay here with this much. I'm using this example because I think everybody can relate to buying a car. Oh, multiple targets. What are these? Okay, whole new world. So what is this? Okay, we have a salesperson involved. Typically we have a financer or a closer involved, and we even have the shop involved in selling a car. But what do they do? When does it happen? Things like that. So again, customer on the lot happens with the salesperson. Salesperson connects, identifies needs. 3, 4, determine bottom line pricing. They might be the one, and it can move around, by the way. 5, possibly in the conditional close, offering upgrades. Now we begin to start possibly, we're in the finance department, and they're beginning to close the sale. That's a financer and a closer. I might have some of these numbers a little weird, but you see the gist of this. So number 8, we can see that they're involved in that. Why did the shop get involved at number 8, which is closing the sale? Well, as soon as we know the sale's closed, they got to go wash the car and get it all shiny and all that stuff. So we see how we're beginning to think of all the things that are going on, all from this customer's perspective. Got me? So they don't know what all is going on, but we did. And 9 being customer survey, right? And 10 being bring your car back for more, service in the future. Okay, you with me so far? Now, I'm going to throw one more thing into this, and that is social media. Okay, let's see how social media is going to fit into this. So, where's that going to happen? And it could happen in a couple of places, but I want you to just bear with me. So again, it goes through the process on the lot, quickly, going through all these people, meeting with the financer, all the things we're very used to. It's all happening right now in the sales area. We eventually start moving into, we got to start talking with the closer and all that kind of stuff going on. Commitments are being made. We're buying the car. They got to now bring the car out to us. So it's sitting out there. Here's your car. And then we go to number 9, customer survey. We want that customer survey to be a part of our social media, right? Because we, again, want to start pulling more people in, remember? So this is just an introduction of how you would begin to start working with not only people or ideas or processes or concepts. You can put anything into this target. But here's the important part of this. Everybody knows exactly what their role is in this stuff and when it's going to be taking place, if you will. I realize this is a simple car sale. But this is one in particular that I'm very proud of. This is the company that I sold. It actually is a partnership in West Connect, Quest Communication, which is a big service company in the Northwest, and Oregon Food Bank, of all places, right? This is in 14 states. This program grew to be the largest lead generator for Quest Communications in 14 states. And how did it work? And it had Oregon Food Bank involved in it. And this is what's known as a cause-related marketing type concept. And basically the way that, and this is, I'll go through this fast, but again, we were selling DSL internet services, right? And so we had customers interested and needs to know, will it work? Will DSL work? Salesperson or customers involved, West Connect's involved. They have to look at the product. They have to perform a loop test for the client. Remember, the clients, everything's centric around them. Who's going to do that? Who's going to do that? They are. Okay, good. Solve that problem. See? What's the next thing? Notify of the loop test. In other words, we got to get back to this client. Yes, you do qualify. Would you like to do it? What are the educational pieces? You with me? Answering questions. See how it's beginning to build now. Client orders the DSL. Okay, who's going to do that? Okay, that's happening at Quest. We suddenly call Quest into the process because they're the line provider. Modem delivery, it's got to be all delivered. So now you see how we're touching tons of things. Who's going to do that? WestConnect's going to do it. Service provisioning, who's going to do that? Well, it requires Quest. It also requires, just Quest. Testing of the connection. Begin to see. Anyway, we're going through it. Confirm it's complete. Where is this happening? He confirms. Notice nothing's going on with the food bank over there yet, though. Weird, it's out there, right? But we're at 9, confirm complete. Okay, WestConnect confirming things are going on. Customer survey, right? Where's that at? 10, I got it. And over there, WestConnect involved. There's nothing else. Here's where our stuff came in. For every DSL connection that we made, Quest donated to the food bank $45. So that was a lead generator that went on, and it's still in place, by the way. That was built in 2003. The company who bought me out, Opus Interactive, absolutely refuses to touch that website because to this day it continues to generate this profit. So I'm going to very quickly go into a case study here in the solar industry because this is really a cool one. There was a study conducted back several years ago that it took, and I know we're not here to do solar, but I think this helps, 24-month buying cycle. In other words, the point is from the day that somebody wakes up and goes, I think I'm interested in buying solar, and they start going and doing their research and introducing themselves to the industry, if you will, and communicating and all that kind of stuff. So the day that it actually got turned on, this actually had nothing to do with the evaluation. So the day it got turned on was 24-month buying cycle. Huge. People, you would never have been able to stay in business doing that kind of a thing. Imagine every client you did business with took 24 months for you to get money out of them. So what are we going to do about that? And so what it boiled down to was you also had all these strategic partners involved in Oregon. Solar Oregon was the educator piece. The city of Portland was involved in some of the advertisement and pieces. Energy Trust had to touch the client because they had to do what's called on-site surveys to make sure solar would work. And for you to get your incentives, I won't go into all that process, but this was a very complicated. It took many, many moving parts to sell solar. That's why it took 24 months. Someone got interested, and then they went, oh, man, this is overwhelming. Look at all this stuff. We had to figure out how do we speed that up, see? How do we turn this around? So the Solarized programs came along, and that was these people that wanted to educate their constituencies of their neighborhood about solar, hoping that it would speed up the process as well. And, again, we had our app system in place. Now you see why I have the app system I was showing you. And so we had a platform. We had a way of building it. We had a way of having it on the cloud. Are you with me here? And now we're working with all these people, and we had to have multiple vendors throughout the state of Oregon all involved in the process because we were going to speed it up, right? It also meant we were going to have multiple campaigns throughout the state, so to speed it up, okay? And we would have to have multiple entry points. In other words, the vendors would have to have places where people could sign up to learn more about solar and get into the system. Solar Oregon would have to. City of Portland would have to. The Oregon Department of Energy would have to. I mean, just all these different places. Look how complicated this can become. We got all this information coming in from multiple sources now. And on top of that, we had to also make it so that Energy Trust and these departments could reach back out and get the appropriate information about each client who signed up in our lead generator so that they could walk them through the process of buying solar, educate them, everything else. And yet we were dealing with multiple partnerships and all this stuff, right? Well, it's really to just get very, very confused. Who's doing what, when, where, So, again, I'm going to bring you back here. I'm going to remove the Solarized because we had all this in place. So suddenly I was faced with this process of figuring this out. And so how did I do it? Okay. Remember we talked about paper. Okay. So, step one. What's the name of the campaign? It was called Solarized. Okay, that's just so I can identify where we are. What is the purpose of this app? Well, it's to speed up the sales process, to engage people more quickly, and to have people buying solar quicker than 24 months. It's just that simple. Who are all the individuals in departments and partnerships that are going to be a part of that information? So again, if you just take this piece of paper idea and you just write on there, what these three key elements, it begins to just tell a developer like me what it is you're trying to do for the most part. It's the beginning aspects of it. Okay? Then it comes down to drawing the expected interaction diagram. So I've already given you one of Solar Oregon's Solarize campaign, but we're going to click through it here in a minute. The idea is literally just take a pencil and paper, draw a circle of the client, cross through it, and then take all those people that you named on your first page, or departments or whatever, and draw a circle for every one of those, right? And then just start from that process. So how did it go? So we're going to mimic the process again. So it actually got far more complicated than this. But basically what it boiled down to was you had departments now of Energy Trust having to do various things, whether they were in the energy department or were they in the solar department. And this would never do the same thing as this person. Does that make sense, And then you had the vendors who had to install. So, again, we're getting these leads, these people that are interested in solar, right? And we don't want them just sitting around because time is of the essence here, folks. We do not slow down on lead generators, okay? We keep it moving. And so we got to know who's going to touch whom when and what are they going to do. Okay, so we mimic the process. Registration, I'm interested in solar. Okay, so the client does it. Client-centric, so we always have the client involved. Who's going to be involved in that? Well, Solar Oregon had said, and there were actually many more. It was more than I wanted to put on this. But Solar Oregon was one point of entry for the client, if you will, and so was the champion partner, which could be Energy Trust, or it could be a vendor, or it could be actually a city. We did this with government. We did this with counties. So you see how this jumped around? Okay. This could actually be Alachua County. Okay. Then we had departments. So we could have had this introduction also happening at the vendors level, and in some cases we did. I did multiples of these programs, so trying to keep it simple here. So verification, is this a valid request for solar, that sort of thing, calling the client, getting in touch with them, making sure that we're moving forward properly. Who's going to do that? Champion partner had agreed. I'm going to be the one in charge of that. Okay. That tells me a lot. See, I know who's going to have to touch that information. Okay. So, workshops, educational pieces, right? Who's going to do them? Solar Oregon's going to do it, as with the champion partner. Okay. Pre-assessment for solar. Now we start moving into who's going to do some of the on-site type of stuff. Well, the department's going to do that. Assessment for the energy. Who's going to do that over here? Vendor install the solar. So the vendor now has to touch that information. So are you catching on here that all of these different players were going to need access to this information? So we haven't even talked about data yet. This has all been around just processes and systems. But the truth of the matter is, in order to pull this off, we had to have a system on the backside where all of these people could get access to it through a cloud environment. So it's beginning to tell me I know exactly who needs to touch what and when and where. Okay? Solar reconciliation, who's going to reconcile at the end of the campaign, things like that. Nonprofits are notorious for that. So basically we end up with, who's going to do the evaluation. And it can vary all over the place. Okay? But here's my point. We went into this knowing exactly what was going to do. We didn't get halfway in and go, this is not working. Who's going to do what? Is that we're actually building an application. We're building something that is going to work on the Internet where people can actually register, and then we're going to run it on the back end and be able to log in as individuals. All of these people have access only to the information they have privilege to. So imagine, I was doing this for lots of different people. So I had to keep very track of who was doing what on when. And this is the process that helps do that. So step 3, here's where we get into creating the single page for each targeted touch point with the following information. So on your third page, basically all we're doing is we're just trying to find out, well, what is the touch point name? So like the champion, okay, in a minute ago, let's go back. These are actually the touch point names. Solar Oregon, champion. Or excuse me, these are the touch point names. Those are the targets. So these are the touch point names. Okay, these become the touch point names. Because we know that person has to register. We're going to verify it. We're going to do some looking at maps and things. See, this is the part that gets more complicated. Workshops, pre-assessments for solar, that sort of thing. These are our touch points. You with me? So now once we know what our touch points are, now we can, for every single one of those touch points, you take a blank piece of paper, put on one piece of paper the touch point name, like registration. Just plain old registration. What attribute did it fit? Introductory, termination, commitment, or in the evaluation? Because that tells us very quickly, this is where that fits now, right? Okay? A little bit of a description. What is it going to do? You know, they're going to register to learn more about solar and give us their personal information. You know, the verification process would be different. If we're at the second one, if we're at this one, verification, what it had to do with was the attribute or the brief description would be, someone's going to call the client, because remember we got their phone number and everything. They're going to call the client. They're going to verify this really was something that their brother didn't do it for fun, but whatever. We're going to determine more about their house, their roof, you know, things like that. You with me? So again, we're going to go, well, what is the brief description? List of information needed. I might need more information about the roofing, the age of the home, you know, things of that nature. So again, all we're doing is we're just simply breaking these out in a simple process. So if you imagine taking a piece of paper and you have this now scoped, right, and your circles and everything, now you have all your pieces of paper in a nice little notebook. Well, that's the one I forgot, by the way. But then you can actually take this notebook with all your notes, anything else, with this process, and I'll guarantee you that anybody, even if they don't know this system, they'll be able to look at that with you being able to say, this person's going to do this person's going to do that, this is the information we're going to need. It will definitely give them the high-level capability to look at your application and go, I know exactly what all the pieces are to put this together. And that's what this is about, is being able to demonstrate to a technician who's going to write this for you, okay? So, again, so you just use this process there. You list all of these kinds of information there. And what is the kind of information that you're getting? This can sometimes get a little bit more complicated, but it's pretty basic. You know, we want their name, address, phone, email, you know, whatever it is we're dealing with. And it doesn't matter. Maybe we're dealing with buying and selling cars and nobody's going to give us this information over the Internet. It doesn't mean that it has to come from the Internet, by the way. The fact that somebody walks on your car lot, hasn't touched the Internet yet, did not register for anything, but they're going to become a customer, aren't they going to go in your database sometime? Think about it, right? They're going to go in your database. So where and when and how, you know, so this is what's going to do that, what's going to determine that. And what information do we need on that touch point? Is that making sense? So a couple of things about software that are helpful to know. And it really kind of just boils down to, there's just two basic things that happen, some more, but two basic things that have to do with file management, record management, database type functions. And it has to do with you're either submitting brand new information or you're modifying or reporting existing information, right? And so if you can kind of realize that whatever ones are actually fitting that criteria, it is helpful, but a good database or development person can pretty much figure that out. But the truth of the matter is, in that particular scenario, if we had a registration, we just needed a registration screen, right, with the right information. Now we've captured that information coming in from multiple locations. When they're verifying and pulling up records say the city of Portland needs to pull up that information, they actually just pull up only things that they can modify or report, that sort of thing. They can only modify. They're not submitting new information. In this particular scenario, we typically are only submitting new information one time, a new start at one time. After that, we begin to just modify what's there, so to speak. I won't go into real detail about that. But that's helpful to know because you can now begin to start seeing how your app is going to work. You can also take this and lay it down in a timeline.